Hey there, pre-AP. We are on outline 8.14. Whew, it's been a long taxonomy unit, but we're almost done, guys. So congratulations. We're going to start talking about invertebrates. Go ahead, make sure you have that highlighter or that writing utensil because we're going to write some stuff. We're going to highlight some stuff. So let's get started. Alright, invertebrates. Think about it. You've learned about invertebrates before. Do invertebrates have a backbone? No, they do not. So let's highlight that. Invertebrates, animals without a backbone. These are considered to be lower grade animals. Out beside that, put not fancy. They're not fancy organisms. They're pretty simple compared to us, which are incredibly complex. We need to highlight that these are mostly aquatic life forms. So they live in fresh water, but a lot of them live in salt water. We also need to highlight they are 95% of all known animal life that exists today. So only that 5% have a backbone or vertebrates. Invertebrates outnumber us a whole lot. So let's talk about some specific ones. In this video, we're going to talk about part 1 and part 2, where we're going to look at a few types of invertebrates. And then another video will be parts 3 through 5. So if you're looking for part 3 through 5, go look for another video. So here we go. So here's some invertebrates that we're going to talk about. In this video, we're going to talk about Parazoa. We're going to talk about Radiolata. We're going to talk about Bilateralata. Then some of the others we'll kind of move on. We'll talk about some worms in here. We're going to talk about Eumetozoas a little bit more. Going to talk about those body cavities, our collimates, our acolymates, our pseudocollimates. We'll probably get to collimates later though. So here we go. First one is Porifera. This is under Parazoa. So highlight Parazoa. These are like animals. Para means like, zoa means animal. So the one that we'll focus on in here is phylum Porifera. Please highlight that this means that they have pore bearers. And highlight these are sponges. So they're porous. They have these porocytes and their little openings. You can see them all over the sponge. This is where water can enter. We also need to highlight that, remember, these animals, because they're animal-like, but why they're called animal-like is because they have no true tissues. Please highlight that. Meaning, in terms of tissues, they do not possess muscle or nervous tissue. They are sessile. That means non-moving. Sponges like to find some type of surface to attach to, and they will live there their entire life. They don't like to get up and move around. Why is that? Because they are filter feeders. And then they are hermaphroditic, which means that they contain both sexes. Please put out beside there. All that means is contain both male and female reproductive organs. They contain both sets. So they have male gametes and female gametes. What they'll do is they'll expel their gametes into the air, self-fertilize in the water. They have external fertilization. That means outside the body in the water. Those gametes will fuse together. They'll make teeny tiny baby sponges. There'll be little bitty dots floating out in the water. And then hopefully some of them will find somewhere, attach, and then grow a sponge like we see here, here, and here. Alright, moving on. So this is what their body structure looks like. They have this osculum, which is a very big opening. Whoop. They also have, of course, as you can see in here, these are the porocytes where water can enter. And remember that osculum is where that water is going to exit. So it'll enter here through all of these pores. and then it will all leave out here. The water will come in, they will circulate and separate out their food, and then send the water out, but keep the food. Alright, so Cnidaria. These are under radial Eumetozoa. Eumetozoa, those are our true animals, if you want to put out beside there. True animals. So remember, Parazoa means we're like animals. These are the true animals. So if you are a Cnidaria, you are things like a jellyfish and a sea anemone, like where Nemo lived. And then remember the jellyfish that Dory went up to, and it was the little baby jellyfish, and she would go, "You are my squishy, and you will be mine, and you will be my squishy." And then later, whenever they went to the jellyfish field, and they bounced, boing, 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 on top of the jellyfish. But then they said, hey, just don't get near the tentacles, you won't get stung. Anyway, off my Nemo rant. Alright, so if you are a Cnidarian, you are diploblastic, which means that you have 2 germ layers. You are also an endoderm, so please highlight these 2 germ layers. One is called an endoderm, that's for your digestion. The other layer is an ectoderm, so think about endo, inside, digestive systems on the inside. And then you have an ectoderm. Remember, ecto means outside. That's your protective layer. So here we go. This is where your endoderm would be. Gastrointestinal. And then your ectoderm is your epidermis. Also, your marine animals. You are salt water animals. You will not find, you're not going to find a jellyfish in Gunnersville Lake. And they have 2 life stages. They have a polyp stage. This is where, these are kind of like their babies. They would be sessile, which remember that means they are non-motile. Kind of similar, and they do look like sponges in appearance, but they are going to grow. And then it's going to move into a medusa stage. And that means that's whenever they're going to be motile. So there's the polyp stage. And they kind of look like a sponge a little bit. They're going to stay sessile. They're going to attach somewhere. Then they're going to grow. They're going to move to the medusa stage. And they're actually going to be motile. And they're going to look like that adult jellyfish that you're used to seeing. So let's talk about parts of a jellyfish. Because most people don't know the parts of a jellyfish. And this is one of my favorite parts. In this jellyfish, different jellyfish. Yeah. It does have a very big, nice, round bell. So the bell is the top portion of the jellyfish. Aren't they cute? And then they have tentacles. We all know what tentacles look like. And remember, those are the stinging portion. They have those little ctenocytes. Those are stinging cells. Mainly, they will use these to ward off predators and also to kind of paralyze their prey. So, whenever Marlin got stung with those tentacles, it paralyzed him. Well, not Marlin. Woo! Hold on, wrong character. Stung Dory, right? I know you're going, but Miss Minor, that is it's wrong, Miss Minor. So, they do not have a stomach. If you're an Cnidarian, you have a gastrovascular cavity. Please highlight that this is for digestion and food distribution. And unlike that sponge, they have a mouth and an anus. Remember, that sponge just had openings, like that osculum and that porocytes. And these creatures are sexual reproduction during the medusa stage, the motile stage. But if you're in this polyp stage, you're asexual reproduction. So remember, sexual reproduction, if you need to put out beside there, requires gametes, egg and sperm. Asexual reproduction does not require egg and sperm. So life cycles of both forms. Polyp stage, medusal stage, these are also external fertilization. They distribute their gametes out into the water, and then they will fuse together, make a zygote, and then grow in that polyp stage, and then it will eventually turn into that medusa stage. Then we have life all over again, circle of life, Cnidarian style. So cnidocytes, or cnidocytes, either way, this is what they look like underneath a microscope. So remember, mainly they want to use these for prey, but sometimes they will use them to ward off predators. So Pleomanthes, these guys are so funky looking. Please highlight these are flatworms. Now they're triblastic, or triploblastic. That means they have 3 germ layers. They have an ectoderm, remember that means outside layer. Mesoderm, that's going to be your middle layer. They're going to actually have muscles, or they make muscles. And then an endoderm inside. But remember, please highlight that these are acolymates. And if we remember acolymates, do you remember? Do you? That means without a cavity. They do not have a cavity because of that A. A means not collimate, no cavity. And remember, these are small animals, and the way that they're going to transport things is by osmosis and diffusion across the membrane. Highlight why they are an acolyte, because they can only be a couple of cells thick. And we kind of compare these to bryophytes. Their nervous system, please highlight that they have a ganglia brain and nerve cords, which are going to help them respond to the environment. These are very simple animals. To be able to see, they have eye spots, but mainly they're going to just be there to detect light. They're going to have a gastrovascular cavity, and it's going to run the length of their long, flat body. Please highlight that they have a single anus / mouth opening. So their anus and their mouth are the same opening. Body structure, just to reiterate, eye spots, there to detect light. Ganglia, that's kind of like their brain structure. Gastrovascular cavity, it's going to run the length. This is their central nerve cord. It's going to help them respond to stimuli. We also need to highlight that they have these things called flame cells. We kind of talked about them before. Remember, highlight, those flame cells are there to excrete that nitrogenous waste, which would be an equivalent to your kidneys. So this is their kidney-like structure, because they have to get rid of waste somehow. And there are 4 classes of good old Pleomanthes. These are Turbellaria, and hold on, Turbellaria. Sorry, it's hard to pronounce. Highlight that these are free-living marine carnivorous flatworms. Trematodes, these are also called flukes. Please highlight that these are internal or external parasites, because mainly you're going to get these distributed through feces in the water. So these are parasites. These are not good. The most common is schistosomiasis. This is a blood liver fluke. It gets in the water. People, get in the water. Those flukes reproduce in the water, and those fertilized eggs are going to exist in the feces. And this type of fluke actually kills 200 million people a year. Mainly these are in third world countries, but this is what this little guy looks like under the microscope. Ugh. And then one that you're probably very familiar with is the tapeworm. Please highlight that these are parasites and they're of the intestine. You can tell if someone has a tapeworm if they have experienced extreme weight loss. And what that good old tapeworm does is it pretty much just takes all your nutrients away from you. So there are two big parts to the tapeworm. There is a scolex. Highlight that it's the head, and this is the scolex right here. Ooh, it's got sucker heads, which allow it to hold on to your intestines, and then it'll, yuck. And then it has these things called proglottides, and they're the reproductive segments. These are hermaphroditic, so they don't need another tapeworm. They just have both reproductive organs, and they reproduce inside your intestine tract. Yuck. And please highlight that they can be acquired by contaminated feces in the water. Or accidentally, in the case of dogs and cats, usually, they ate poop. Ooh, it's terrible. Gross. I told you about the weight loss tablets and tapeworms. Oh, it was bad. Alright, so moving on to type 2. Good old part 2. Let's go, let's go. Let's talk about our second type of invertebrate. Mollusks. I love me some mollusks. Please highlight this is in phylum Mollusca, which means they have a soft body. And they have a protective shell. It can be internal or external. And that good old shell is made of chitin or calcium carbonate. If it's internal, it's usually chitin. If it's outside, it's usually calcium carbonate. And all mollusks have 3 soft body parts. They have a foot, a mantle, and a visceral mass. Now that foot, please highlight it's for moving. Whether it's swimming or grabbing prey, or if you're like that clam that we're going to dissect, you hop. The mantle, it's just a flap of tissue that produces the shell. It's a gland. And then visceral mass, it contains all your vital organs. Whenever we dissect the clam, we're going to notice that in that side, that visceral mass, it's a large bump, and it will have the heart, and it'll have the stomach, the gonads, and the nephridia, which are the kind of the nerve cells. In the clam, though, the gills are going to be outside of the visceral mass, we're going to notice. There's also a mantle cavity. Please highlight that this contains the gills. Or if you're a terrestrial mollusk, like this cute little snail, they're going to actually have lungs. Some have radiola, which are barbed, shredding tongues that go back and forth. Some have beaks. That's like an octopus or a squid. Those are they're eagle-like shaped, and those are in the cephalopods, like I said. Those octopus and squid, and they're for actually grabbing prey and eating it. And they actually have separate sexes, which means you are either a male mollusk or a female mollusk. Snails, they're going to be hermaphroditic. Also, our clam that we're going to dissect, it is going to be hermaphroditic. So let's talk about those 4 classes. Basic mollusk structure, mantle, outside tissue, again, radiolata. They're going to have nerve cords. That foot is going to be for movement. This is an aquatic mollusk, you can tell. Inside this whole thing is the visceral mass. This is what it holds. All of these lovely things. Your stomach, your intestine, your gonads, your heart, your nerve cells. Alright, so let's talk about some of these. Some of these words are so hard to say, but I'm gonna try, guys, because every year I forget how to say this. Polyplacophora. Polyplacophora. So these, what that literally means is mini plates. Highlight these are flatworms, or they're flatline organisms, and they have 8 hard protective plates. And they are not made of cotton, they're actually made of really tough material, calcium carbonate. There's gastropoda. Please highlight these are stomach foot pods. That's pretty much what it means. And these are snails and slugs. Remember, slugs do not have a shell. Snails do. We need to highlight that most of these are marine. Very few are terrestrial. And they have a head with eye stalks, which allow them to see a little bit better. And then most of them have a twisted shell, like in this picture, made of calcium carbonate. But remember, like I said, slugs do not have a shell on the outside. So cute little snail. It's got that mantle cavity. It's got a mouth. Bivalva, go and put out beside there. These are clams. Valve means shell. Bi means two. These are two shells. So highlight these are oysters, scallops, and clams. We're going to dissect that clam. Please highlight that these organisms possess shells of two halves, and they're made of calcium carbonate. Those shells opening and closing are controlled by these things called adductor muscles. We're going to see that in our dissection video we'll watch. And highlight these are filter feeders. That's how they obtain their food. They filter the water. They're going to, of course, use gills, because they're aquatic, for gas exchange. So this is what it looks like. We're going to actually, this is awesome. So here's the adductor muscles. There's one on each side. And what they do is they hold the clam open or shut. There's the gills. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I want you to know, hey, we're going to find all of these things inside that clam we're going to dissect. It's going to be awesome. Cephalopoda. These are actually called head-foot organisms. And these are the squid and the octopus and something called a nautilus, which we'll talk about a little bit in just a second. Alright, so most of these are aerodynamic, and they are carnivorous predators with beaks. That beak is there to help, and I'll show a video of an octopus eating a hermit crab tomorrow. It's pretty scary. They have a beak on the inside, and you can't see it because the tentacles cover it up, and they sit on top of their prey, and then they open and crack open shells like clams and maybe a hermit crab and take that soft-bodied animal outside. Ooh. Sorry, guys. Alright, so some of the last things we need to know. They move by jet propulsion using siphons, which means that they're going to swim backwards. They have a shell. It's external if you're a nautilus, because you're a living fossil. You are this guy right here. And then if you are a squid or an octopus, you have an internal shell. In a squid, it's called a fin. They have a closed circulatory system and digestive tract. Remember, if you have a closed circulatory system, you have arteries and veins. This is why this type of mollusk is much bigger than the others. And please highlight, they have a well-developed nervous system. They have a very, very advanced brain for all of the mollusks, because they're predators. They have to have really good eyes to be able to see their prey, and they have to have a very well-developed brain so that they can process, oh, that's food. These guys are really smart. And I'll show you some videos tomorrow in class, and you'll think, ooh, man, these guys are smart. Alright, so I hope that was helpful. The next video is part 3 through 5.